Good morning and welcome to the next tour. I'm Ian,
I'm Andia.
and we are here on episode 20 talking transition and education using post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, part 2 with Kate Horrell. And I'm going to let Andia do the introduction with our wonderful guest here, but we're excited.
Yes, so much. So thanks for being here, Kate. For those of you that don't know Kate, she is a military, well, was a military spouse. No, is a military spouse. You hold
Yes,
that forever, just like I do.
true.
Um, Her spouse served 30 years in the Navy and retired as an '06 in 2021. He is fully retired, and Kate is a financial educator. And if you've read anything about finances, or GI Bill benefits, you've probably seen Kate's name.
Right here,
And
yeah.
of course, she just came out with an excellent book. So, Kate, thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have you.
I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, as you saw that I held up the cover to your book about college finances for military families, it's about leveraging that post 9/11 GI Bill benefit and how best to do that. And what I'd really like to do is see if you could kind of pull the thread on your background, your experience, and what led you to be inspired to write this book about these wonderful benefits that we're entitled to.
Yeah, so we have 4 kids who are now all college graduates. And as a financial educator, I'm a researcher at heart. I like to know the nitty-gritty about how every single thing works. And we literally had all 4 kids in college when my husband retired. So we had a pretty high need to make sure that we weren't leaving any benefits on the table. We paid for 16 years of college in about 8 years. And that was a lot, particularly at the same time that my husband retired. So as I got smart about this, I started sharing my knowledge at conferences. Andy has been at some of those, and at different organizations and at my blog. And people said to me, typically after the presentations, "Oh my gosh, that was so much information. Is there a book?" And so very slowly, I managed to put all of the stuff that I had together, and it finally came out this year.
That's awesome. Well, I got to tell you, having gone through the book, uh, Andy and I both, it's laid out really well, and it's a very easy read. It's very digestible. But what I really love about how you package it up, quite frankly, is its relatability. And that I think is so important because on our last episode, which is why, of course, this is part 2 on leveraging the post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, we talked to Dedrick Curtis, and Dedrick really kind of guided through the process side of things, which is really excellent because you got to know where to go to get the resources. But I think then how do you take those resources and put them in motion for your benefit to best take all the benefits that are on that table and use them? This is it. This, folks, is, I think, an incredible resource to be able to leverage and put it in context to best use for you and your family. So, yeah, 4 kids in college as you retire. Oh my goodness, you guys were living in an incredibly challenging time period. And this, thank you for putting it together. Put it in there one more time because again, it's that much of an incredible resource. So thank you, Kate. That's a really inspiring story on how to be able to get that.
Absolutely. So I'm not going to say that Ian stepped all over my question, but he literally just asked my next question. Which is, yeah, I
It
mean,
happens.
yeah, it happens. But we knew this was, this conversation was going to be pretty easy because, we're living this too. Our daughter is currently in college. Our oldest utilized ROTC. She got an ROTC scholarship. We featured both of them on a previous episode, but we learned a lot, just in the first couple of years of having Mina in and using, Ian's GI Bill benefits. We were really smart. We all still have 1 month so that we at the end can figure out what to do. But I think we've learned a lot, but every single time I, talk to you or hear you speak, I think about all the different nuances of leveraging the GI Bill. So please feel free to share some of those with us and how to best leverage that benefit for your family.
The most important thing, and I hope it comes across as sort of the theme of the book, is that your family's educational benefits are best viewed in a bucket for the whole family and not like siloed. Often when I sit down with clients and I say, tell me what your situation is, the first thing they'll say to me is, well, kid A has $30,000 in their 529 plan and 18 months of the GI Bill, and kid B has $28,000 in their 529 plan and 18 months of the GI Bill. And so we need to know how to do that. I'm like, okay, let's just pretend that you didn't, like, we're going to take those numbers that you said, but we're going to take the people out of them. We're just going to throw all of these resources into a bucket, and then we're going to look at the problem we have to solve and figure out the most advantageous way to apply those resources. So that's really the big thing. If people can just, and then the book really gets into what does that mean and how do you do that? How
Right.
do you look at a situation and say, it makes more sense to use the GI Bill for this student and use all the 529 money for this student. Or maybe this kid we're going to pay out of pocket and we're going to do something different with another child. And then it's important also to remember that sometimes the kids aren't the best way to use the GI Bill. If a parent can increase their earning power, particularly if the kids are younger, I very frequently talk to people who want to go to college and don't know how to pay for it. And I say, well, is the GI Bill an option? And they say, oh, that's off the table. We're saving that for our kids. Like if you could get whatever extra credentials that you want and make an extra 20 or 30 or 40 or $50,000 a year,
Hmm.
starting now, that is going to pay off so much more for your family than saving the GI Bill for your kids.
That is an incredibly wonderful set of points that you make there, because I think a lot of folks, it's easy to think of the GI Bill as an arithmetic problem, right? It's X dollars, it's Y months, blah, 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 right? But the way you contextualize that into every situation is unique, and every family unit has to take a look at what the ultimate goals are using those contextual aspects of it, I think is so much more important in figuring out what the end goal really is. And that's a wonderful way to look at that.
Absolutely. Especially because it depends on if you're looking at your whole family, what those kids want to do and where they want to go to school and what they want to study and how, there's so many nuances. And I think the idea of, because I got to tell you, we really fell into that trap of thinking of kid A and kid B. Don't tell them I called them that. But I think that using it as a holistic piece does make a lot of sense.
Well, and that's assuming that, all the kids even want to go into college right away. I mean, there are those that go straight into the workforce. There are those that go into the military and get their own GI Bill benefit after time. And then there are those that may use it for trade school. So I think the aperture it tends to be an initial, thought trap, right? It's, kid A, kid B, it's the defined benefit piece, and it's college, but it's not also dependent upon those particular gates. And I really appreciate how you kind of bring that into context. So speaking of that, would you mind sharing some of maybe your stories of personal experience using that benefit, or other stories from folks that you've encountered that really stick out to you that kind of amplify that?
Sure. So because we had so many kids, we were pretty critical every semester we reevaluated. Does it make sense to use the GI Bill for this student for this semester? And as it turned out, the first time we used any GI Bill benefits was one of my kids was in grad school. And we hadn't used any of the benefits for her undergrad program. And I said, listen, how about we pay for a half of your grad school? And we hadn't agreed to pay for grad school, but this was, a plan is dynamic, right? And we had paid very little for her undergraduate education. And so when she decided to go to grad school, I said, it was a 1-year program. Let's use the GI Bill for fall semester. And because it paid the full tuition amount for her fall semester, right? And then It also paid housing allowance for that semester. We ended up getting about $33,000 worth of benefits for 3.5 months of the GI Bill.
Wow.
And I was really, really just thrilled. I thought, we have gotten our bang for our buck here. But then it made really hard for us to pull the trigger on subsequent semesters somewhere else, because I never felt like we were getting that value back out again. So in our case, the result has been we have 4 college graduates and still have 29 months of the GI Bill left. Like,
Oh my
I'm
goodness.
begging people to go to grad school, and people are aging out because that's a big deal,
Mhm.
right? So I guess I'm going to grad school, which is not a terrible problem to have. But it is really interesting to me in that story that we got such tremendous value out of the first use of it, but then it kind of got us into a trap.
Mhm.
Because I didn't want to use it if I wasn't going to get that level of value. And that's not realistic in every situation. First of all, you are probably not going to get the same value that your friend did.
Hmm.
The other thing that I think people need to know, because none of us have a crystal ball, or I don't know if you have a crystal ball, please let me borrow it
Well, it
occasionally.
doesn't work, so.
Darn it, is that sometimes there's going to be benefits that get left over.
Mhm.
And hopefully it's not 29 months. We're going to use these somehow. But sometimes
Wait,
you're
isn't
going to,
there a wine class that you keep telling me about?
there's rules. But yes, our plan had been to go study cheesemaking in Italy, and that may
That's
still
what it was.
happen, right?
How fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I have seen families do really successfully is leverage the way that GI Bill benefits. I call it buying in-state tuition. And so for those of you who don't know, and I don't actually think that Dedrick hit on this, maybe he did. While you are using VA education benefits, schools have to give you in-state tuition. And in many cases, they will allow you to keep that in-state tuition even after you're not using the VA benefits anymore. So in my case, let's say I had 4 kids who all wanted to go to state schools that would let them keep in-state tuition. I could have had a kid at Penn State, a kid in Colorado, right? All over, and all getting in-state tuition because we used 1 semester of GI Bill benefits for each one of them.
Hmm.
So when I've watched families do that, it's been tremendous, particularly at schools where there's a really big difference in tuition between in-state and out-of-state. If they can, buy down a $40,000 tuition to $10,000 a year just by using 1 semester of those benefits, that is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you think about that delta in terms of cost savings, right? We had a friend that did that. I think at their son at Purdue.
Mhm.
I think they did that. They kind of bought that semester.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And because then that can help with the calculus on, does this child want to go to grad school, and do you use that benefit then for grad school? There's just so many factors into it. And I really appreciated the one piece that you talked about in the beginning is reevaluating what that situation is for your family at that point in time. And you got to keep going on and checking back on it because the situation is dynamic. And I think that was a huge piece to flag right there, because it's not a one and done, and that plan just doesn't stay static over the course of time. So that's huge. Thank you for that.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think, reevaluating, we're doing that too, as far as state benefits go, because now that Ian is retired, we live in the state of Virginia. He has a certain level of disability. Actually, Mina can qualify now for state benefits also. And so we've kind of weighed that against, okay, do we want to hold some of the GI Bill benefit for her to potentially use for her master's degree? We didn't tell them they were getting their master's degrees either. We said, look, we'll help you get through your bachelor's degree. But to your point, we're trying to think about what's the best use of those funds, especially when there are other benefits out there. So can you share maybe any other stories you've got? Or I want to definitely give you time to share any other nuances, because I think there's a lot out there. And I think you made a good point too, where no one family is the same either. And you've got to look at, this holistically. But I wanted to give you a chance to share anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, so I work with a lot of clients that actually have multiple different types of benefits because of their military service. They may have the GI Bill, they may have Chapter 35 if someone is 100% disabled. They may live in a state like California has the CalVet program or Texas has the Hazelwood program that confer different benefits to families of veterans based upon criteria, obviously. But a lot of time it becomes like a game of Tetris to figure out, I've got 3 kids and I know this one wants to be a lawyer, but this one really probably just wants to get an undergraduate and I don't have a crystal ball. And how do we plug in those different benefits? And one of the things that I hope I emphasize well in the book is differentiating between the benefits that are tied to the student and the benefits that are collective to the family. Because most of the time you want to use benefits that are tied to the student first, but not always. Sometimes it makes sense to go ahead and utilize a collective benefit and either defer or give up that individual benefit but again, every situation is different.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No,
No kidding.
I was going to say the same thing. Absolutely. And it does. And, actually, we haven't talked about Chapter 35. And I think we were very unaware of it until Ian retired and got his disability rating. And I think, can you just explain that briefly? Because I bet there's a lot of people out there that don't know or have not ever heard of Chapter 35 benefits.
Sure. So Chapter 35 benefits are available to 100% disabled veteran family members. It's actually not a benefit for the veteran themselves. And it provides up to 36 months of a monthly stipend. And I think this year it's like going to be $1,600 a month, maybe. Because like we've rolled into the new school year now.
Yeah.
And that cannot be used at the same time as the GI Bill. And there are different rules. Once you start using that, it impacts disability compensation. But it is another tool to go in the family's toolkit. But it's one of those tools that's tied to the student because every family member has their own 36-month entitlement, up to 36-month entitlement. And so for those of you who do have that level of disability, you want to make sure you understand the program so that you can put it in your bucket while you're figuring out how to put those Tetris pieces together, because sometimes it makes sense to use Chapter 35 first, or sometimes you may want to not use Chapter 35, use the GI Bill, because the GI Bill is a significantly more comprehensive benefit. And like in our case with multiple kids, there's always going to be one kid that it makes more sense to use the GI Bill for them when you lay it all out on the table. You may not know who that is until you're done, which is unfortunate, but there is always one of the examples in the book is twins. And, I use that example very specifically because you do have all of the information before you start the math problem. It's not like a word problem where you get halfway through and then they give you a new piece of information.
Right.
And in that case, it made, I think, about $110,000 difference to not do 18 months each, to just put all the GI Bill for one kid and not the other kid. I could have made it way more dramatic, but I wanted to be realistic.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I appreciate that. I know that was kind of off the cuff where I wanted you to define that, but it was something that we didn't really understand. And when I first heard the word stipend, I was like, oh, on top of tuition. I was like, no. Just the stipend. So
that's it.
Definitely did not make sense for us to switch Mina, from using GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill benefits to Chapter 35. But it was an important aspect for us to understand that we didn't even know existed before.
And
so
when you layer it in on things that like a 529 or whatever other savings, and it can certainly fit based off of the situation that you evaluate at the time for your family. And again, Kate's book, I'm going to flash it again because it is that good. And it's that easy to read, and it really helps layer in this comprehensive benefit in the post 9/11 GI Bill for those families that are eligible and have it, and they're wondering how best to leverage it for them. And as always, we'll make sure that we link everything to be able to get in touch with Kate and use this book and read it from cover to cover multiple times. And
Yeah, reference it as you're going through this whole thing. And I think one thing I wanted to point out is that, and you mentioned this at the beginning, was that your spouse was retiring while you had all these students in. But I think a lot of times like that will happen. That point of retirement will happen like while you have students in college. And so I feel like that, there's just so much you need to know and research, and the book helps so much. So I feel like I did kind of step all over my last question, but is there anything you want to leave, a parting gift for our audience today? I know we could probably talk in detail about this for a lot longer, but I would love to give you the opportunity to share any parting thoughts.
Please, 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 please plan out how you're going to pay for your kids' entire college before you let them get to college. Many families, and it's totally understandable because it's overwhelming. You and I both know how much college costs. And to plan for 4 years of it is really, really shocking. But if you don't plan, I've completely lost the phrase, but something plan to fail, right? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And a lot of people say, well, we're just going to take this 1 year at a time, which is completely understandable, but it's not realistic because you're utilizing your resources as you go. So you have fewer options in ongoing years. A lot of times, many pieces of financial aid are kind of freshman specific. Like all of my kids got a lot of little scholarships their freshman year and very few in subsequent years. So, you look at this as a 4-year project. And if like us, you have multiple kids in school at the same time, maybe look at it as, build out your spreadsheet in 3 dimensions.
Yeah.
So that you're realistically making sure that you're not going to find yourself in a bind, because that's a horrible situation on many, many levels. And it happens far too often that kids get to their junior or senior year and there's no money left. And maybe you've already taken out debt, or maybe your kid is leaving a school that they love without a degree. But if you have taken out debt and there's no degree, like that's kind of a worst case scenario. So a little really thinking ahead may prevent some of those. And they really are tragic situations. Like, I'm not using that word lightly.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really like that word.
On the nose.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kate. As Ian said, we will link to a bunch of stuff so that everybody can get a hold of Kate and also find out how to get her book. So now we're going to move into the fun part of the podcast where we throw some fun questions at you and get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to start us out with a little thing we like to call "What's in Your Rucksack?" And the idea behind this is, what is a metaphorical item that you would like to take with you from military life into now your transitioned, civilian life? And what's something that you would like chuck and leave behind and say, I'm glad that's over?
I hate this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. I'm going to use a synonym: flexibility, right? Yeah. We all learn to become incredibly flexible and just sort of roll with the punches. And that has continued to serve us well into post-retirement life. Just a few months ago, we had a situation that I looked at my husband and I said, I think we need to do this crazy thing and I think we need to do it tomorrow. And he was like, yeah, right. Let's go. Pack up the car, right? Throw the stuff in there. And I don't know that I would have been prepared to make that right decision if I weren't used to just like, let's go. All right. I guess this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
What would I like to leave? That's a really, that I really struggled when you asked me that question because I don't think I have an answer for it. I think maybe I would like to leave all of the stuff that we've accumulated over the years.
Yeah. No, you're right. And those are great answers. You know, the flexibility piece, it's a great building thing that we get as military families. But yeah, you're right. Every time you move, you go to a new assignment, you've got to, just accumulate what works for that place at that time. And then you end up carrying it with you. That's great. It's good to be able to shed some of that stuff.
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Aren't we all?
We are, yes, we continue to do so. And we've been here now 8 years. So
No, it's
yeah,
crazy.
it's perpetual. Okay, so and now it's my turn, and we get to go on to what we call two truths and a lie military style. And the best part is you get to guess which one is the lie from the three facts that we had from our previous guest. You know our previous guest, Dedrick Curtis, and on episode 9, he gave us
19.
his 19. I didn't add the teen on there. Thank you very much. On episode 19. So let me give you his three facts, and you can tell me which one you think is the lie. Okay, so Dedrick said, fact 1, he was T-boned on a road bike by a car and woke up in the emergency room with only a few scratches. Number 2, he said he was a DJ in his town and was so popular that he ended up having a wait list. And number 3, at one point he drove 1,300 miles from New York City to Fort Lauderdale to catch a cruise because his flight was canceled.
Wow, I totally believe all of those things are true. I'm going to guess DJ, but I really feel like those could all be true things.
That's correct.
You
got
got
the
it.
lie. He was never a DJ. Andia actually thought that he was a DJ, but wasn't popular enough to have a wait list. He just wasn't a DJ.
I'm such a good friend.
You are such a good friend.
Uh,
That really makes me laugh.
Isn't that funny? But you could totally see Dedrick as a DJ, right?
Absolutely. He's got
Totally.
such a really dynamic personality.
Totally.
he does. All right, Kate, over to you. What are your three facts that we will reveal on the next episode of the next tour?
So, fact number 1, I did not drink coffee until I was well into my 50s, and I now have a very heavy coffee habit. Number 2, I was prom queen. Number 3, I was raised by a Marine who is 103.
Wow. Huh. Those are all really in different directions.
I know.
And I love all those. But we'll guess later and we'll reveal what the lie was on the next episode of the next tour. So, Kate, thank you so very much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking with you, learning about the family dynamic and the context by which to use the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit. Again, we'll link all this stuff in the show notes. Yeah.
So yeah, thanks, Kate. It was great to have you here. We appreciate all the info on part 2 of this 2-part episode. So to our audience out there, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please comment. Please like stuff. Let us know if there's something you're dying for us to have on the show. You can find everything at thenexttourpodcast.com. But we're on YouTube and of course where you find your podcasts like Apple and Spotify and Audible. So thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you next time on the next tour. Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast and Andia or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.